Hello and welcome to Macabre Histories. The tales we tell here are not for the faint of heart. They are the whispers left behind in the dark corners of the past. If you find solace in the shadows and comfort in the unsettling, then you have found your sanctuary. Please subscribe to our channel and ring that little bell so you never miss a journey into the dark. Tonight, we travel back to a time of gaslight and horse-drawn carriages, to a wound on the map that never healed. This is the story of Eleanor Whitlock and the night her world was erased. The town of Ethelburg, New York, was not a place one found by accident. It was nestled deep in a valley carved from the Appalachian foothills, a 2-day carriage ride from the nearest railway station in Albany. It was a town deliberately lost, surrounded on all sides by the Whispering Woods, a dense ancient forest that the local indigenous tribes had long since abandoned, claiming the earth there dreamed badly. In the autumn of 1892, Ethelburg was a portrait of stern, Victorian prosperity. Its existence was owed to the Whitlock quarry, which produced a unique jet-black marble sought after for the grand mausoleums of New York City and Boston. The town was orderly. The streets were cobbled. The gas lamps were lit precisely at 6 p.m. by young Thomas O'Malley, and the steeple of the First Reformation Church, pastored by the severe Reverend Blackwood, pierced the sky like a warning. 10-year-old Eleanor Whitlock lived in the finest house on the hill, a stark, black marble-fronted manor that overlooked the entire valley. Eleanor was a quiet, observant child, prone to fancies, as her mother, a severe woman named Catherine, called them. Eleanor preferred the company of the attic playroom, where the single round window gave her a god's-eye view of Ethelburg. On this particular evening, October 14th, the air was wrong. A fog, thick and oily, had rolled in from the Whispering Woods not long after dusk. This was not the clean, wet mist of the mountains. This fog carried a scent, a coppery metallic tang, like old pennies and ozone. It clung to the windows, muffling the already quiet town in a suffocating blanket. From her attic perch, Eleanor watched Thomas O'Malley struggling with the lamps. The gaslight fought the fog, turning the air a sickly, greenish yellow. The lamps didn't illuminate. They just created small, desperate islands of light in a sea of gloom. Downstairs, her parents were arguing. Their voices were muffled, but the tone was sharp. Eleanor crept to the attic door, cracking it open, the scent of her father's pipe tobacco and her mother's lavender water mixing with the strange metallic smell from outside. "Cannot be delayed, Arthur." Her mother's voice was tight. Reverend Blackwood was clear. "The compact is due." "It is superstition, Catherine, rank paganism." Her father, Arthur Whitlock, was a man of science and industry. He owned the quarry. He scoffed at the local color. "We are in the 19th century. We do not pay debts to the soil." "Do you think the quarry's prosperity was an accident?" her mother hissed. "Do you think the founders built this town on bedrock? They built it on a promise. Blackwood says the signs are aligned. The harvest is ready." "Harvest? It is lunacy. I will not have my family frightened by a backwoods preacher's ghost stories. The fog is just fog. Now see to supper." The argument ceased, replaced by the tense scrape of a chair. Eleanor retreated to her window. The fog was now so thick she could barely see the street below, but she could feel something. A low, resonant vibration that came not through her ears, but through the floorboards, through the soles of her leather boots. It felt, she would later recall, like a giant sleeping heart had just woken up beneath the town. The church bell began to toll. It was not the call to vespers. It was a slow, erratic dong, 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 as if the ringer was hesitant, or as if the bell itself was resisting. Then, the lights in Ethelburg, one by one, went out. Not the gas lamps, but the warm kerosene lights in the windows of the houses. The bakery, the general store, the boarding house. Darkness consumed the valley, leaving only the greenish street lamps glowing like sick eyes in the gloom. Eleanor clutched the porcelain doll she'd named Miss Beatrice. The humming in her feet was getting stronger. And from the street below, a sound began. The sound of shuffling. A great communal shuffling, like hundreds of people walking through dry leaves. But there were no leaves on the cobbled street. The sound from the street was not panicked. There were no screams, No shouts of alarm as the lights went out. There was only the sound of doors opening, the squeak of hinges, the click of latches, all in near unison. And then the shuffling. Eleanor pressed her face to the cold, damp glass of the attic window. The fog was a living thing, swirling in patterns that defied the windless night. The greenish glow of the gas lamps seemed to be pulsing now, in time with the low, resonant thrum that vibrated in Eleanor's bones. She called down, her voice small. "Mama? Papa?" The reply was the sound of her own front door opening downstairs. It didn't slam, it just opened wide to the night. Terror, cold and absolute, seized her. This was not a fear of burglars or phantoms. This was a primal, ancient fear. The fear of the lamb realizing the wolf is not just near, but that the entire flock is walking calmly into its maw. She did not run downstairs. Instinct told her that to be seen was to be lost. She scrambled away from the window and dove into the one place in the attic that felt safe. A large cedar-lined wardrobe where her mother stored winter blankets and out-of-season clothes. Eleanor burrowed deep behind the heavy wool coats, pulling them over her, leaving only a tiny gap to peek through the darkness. She smelled mothballs and lavender, a scent of home that now seemed like a cruel joke. From her hiding spot, she had a view of the attic room, the round window, and the landing just outside the attic door. The hum grew louder. It was no longer just a vibration. It was an audible, subterranean groan. It sounded like 1,000 grinding stones, or an immense rusted machine coming to life deep within the earth. It was a sound that seemed to demand obedience. She heard them. Footsteps on the stairs. Not the heavy, confident tread of her father or the quick, light steps of her mother. These were measured, heavy, wet. A slow, rhythmic thud. Drag, thud. Drag. Eleanor clamped a hand over her mouth, tasting the wool of her own sleeve. The air in the wardrobe was stifling, but the air outside had turned impossibly cold. She saw her own breath plume in the dark gap of the wardrobe door. The attic door, which she had left ajar, swung open with a slow, agonizing creak. A figure stood silhouetted against the dim light of the hallway. It was not her father or mother. It was too tall. Its shoulders were too wide. It seemed to duck to get through the doorway, and for a moment, Eleanor thought its head had brushed the ceiling. It stood perfectly still, a solid block of shadow. It didn't seem to be breathing. It just listened. Eleanor's heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic bird in a cage, convinced the sound alone would give her away. The figure tilted its head as if parsing a distant sound. The hum peaked, rattling the porcelain doll on the floor, making it skate a few inches across the floorboards. The shadow thing did not look at the doll. It turned its head slowly, scanning the room. Eleanor could see no features, just an outline. But she felt its attention pass over the wardrobe. It was a cold, indifferent assessment, like a farmer gazing over a field of wheat. She was not what it was looking for. It turned and descended the stairs with the same thud, drag. She remained frozen for what felt like an eternity. The house was silent again, save for the all-encompassing hum from outside. But the hum had changed. It was no longer just a sound. It was a voice. It was a chorus of thousands, all speaking the same word, drawn out over and over, so low it was barely language. Ul-ah-tho, ul-ah-tho. It was a summons. The summons was impossible to ignore. From the depths of the wardrobe, Eleanor felt a dreadful pull, a drowsy, magnetic urge to stand up, walk down the stairs, and join the shuffling outside. It was not a request. It was a physical law, like gravity. Her limbs felt heavy, her mind foggy. It would be so easy to sleep, so easy to obey. What saved her was a sharp, sudden pain. In her terror, she had bitten down on her own tongue. The coppery taste of her own blood shocked her back to a state of sharp, adrenaline-fueled terror. The fog in her mind cleared, but the pull remained, a current she now had to actively fight. She heard her parents. They were moving. Their bedroom was on the floor below. She heard their door open. Their footsteps were wrong. They were perfectly synchronized, heavy and flat. There was no life in the sound. It was the sound of automata. Driven by a terrible, childish need to see, To understand why her mother and father were leaving her, Eleanor pushed aside the heavy coats and crawled from the wardrobe. Her limbs trembled. The air in the attic was frigid, the metallic smell of the fog seeping in through the window seals. She crept to the attic door and peered down the stairwell. Her father, Arthur Whitlock, was descending the main stairs. He was fully dressed in his day suit, but his tie was askew. His arms were stiff at his sides. His eyes were wide open, staring straight ahead, but they were coated with a milky, cataract-like film. He moved not like a man walking, but like a man being pulled from the front, stumbling slightly to keep his balance. Her mother was just behind him, dressed in her nightgown. Her long hair was unbound. She, too, had the same flat, dead-eyed stare. "Mama?" Eleanor whispered, the sound barely a breath. They did not react. They reached the ground floor and, without pausing, walked straight out the front door, which still gaped open to the yellow-green night. Eleanor was alone, but the house was not empty. The hum was its new occupant. It seemed to be coming from the black marble fireplace in the parlor, from the plumbing, from the very foundations of the house. Eleanor scrambled to the attic window, her sanctuary, the place from which she watched the world. She wiped the condensation from the glass with her sleeve. The street below was filled with people. Every resident of Ethelberg, all 412 of them, was outside. They were moving in a single, silent, shuffling column. Mr. Hemlock the baker, his white apron pristine. Mrs. Davies the schoolteacher, her spectacles glinting in the foul light. Thomas O'Malley, his gaslighter pole still clutched in his hand. Children her own age, in their nightshirts, their bare feet scraping the cold cobbles. No one spoke. No one wept. No one looked at their neighbor. They just moved. The procession was moving away from the houses, away from the edges of town, and converging on the single central location, the town square, directly in front of the First Reformation Church. Eleanor watched her parents join the shuffling line, falling into step between the butcher and his wife. They were all drawn by the hum, which seemed tobe loudest at the square. A new figure appeared, stepping out from the church. Reverend Blackwood. He was not shuffling. He walked with purpose. He wore his full black vestments, and in his hand he held not his Bible, but a long, gnarled staff of dark, unidentifiable wood. He stood on the church steps and raised the staff. As he did, the hum intensified, and the gas lamps on the square flared violently, the green-yellow light turning a deep, sickly purple. The Reverend watched the townsfolk gather. They didn't mill about. They formed perfect concentric circles around the center of the square, facing inward, their milky eyes fixed on something Eleanor could not see. Then Reverend Blackwood turned his head. He looked up, past the crowds, past the fog, directly at the third-story attic window of the Whitlock Manor. He saw her. Eleanor knew he saw her. And in the foul purple light, Reverend Blackwood smiled, a wide, ecstatic, terrifying smile of triumph, before turning back to his congregation. The ground in the center of the square began to change. The hum became a guttural, grinding roar. The cobbles began to crack, not with the violence of an earthquake, but with the sickening precision of something being unzipped. Eleanor, pressed against the glass, watched in mute horror. A light, but not a light, emanated from the cracks. It was a pulsing absence, as she would later describe it, a vortex of shadow so profound it made the surrounding fog look bright. It was a cold, black luminescence that seemed to drink the purple glow of the gas lamps. The earth in the center of the square did not erupt. It retracted. It pulled back like lips from teeth, revealing a chasm. It was not a jagged pit, but a perfectly circular, impossibly deep hole that seemed to have been drilled from beneath. And from this hole, the hum became a shriek, a chorus of agony and ecstasy that vibrated the very glass Eleanor touched. The townsfolk, still in their silent circles, did not flinch. Reverend Blackwood raised his arms high. He began to chant in a language that twisted the air, a series of harsh glottal clicks and sibilant whispers that made Eleanor's ears ache. As he chanted, the first circle of townsfolk, the children, took a simultaneous, shuffling step forward. They reached the edge of the chasm and, without a pause, stepped into it. They did not fall. They were taken. One by one, they stepped into the black light and vanished before their feet could have dropped more than an inch. There was no splash, No sound of impact, just an endless, hungry void. Eleanor's mind tried to break. She wanted to scream, to faint, to run, but she was pinned to the spot, a helpless witness. This was the harvest her mother had spoken of. The next circle began to move. The women, Mrs. Davies, the postmistress, the butcher's wife. They followed the children into the dark. Then the men, Mr. Hemlock the baker, the constable, the quarry foreman. Finally, it was her parents' turn. Arthur and Catherine Whitlock stood at the precipice. For a fleeting, terrible moment, Eleanor thought her father shuddered. He seemed to fight the pull, his head twitching, his hands clenching. Reverend Blackwood's chanting grew harsher. He struck the ground with his gnarled staff. Whatever resistance her father possessed, it broke. He took his wife's hand, and together they stepped into the nothingness. The square was empty, save for the preacher. The chasm pulsed, the black light within it seeming to swirl like a satisfied predator. Reverend Blackwood stood at the edge, his arms still raised. He looked down into the void, his face a mask of religious fervor. He held his staff aloft, then thrust it down into the darkness, like a shepherd guiding his flock. Then, he too stepped forward and was gone. The instant Blackwood vanished, the hum stopped. It didn't fade. It was cut, as if by a knife, plunging the world into a silence more profound and terrifying than any noise. The ground began to close. The cobbles slid back into place, the cracks sealing themselves with a wet, sucking sound. The fog, its purpose served, began to thin, revealing the cold, indifferent stars above. The sickly purple light of the gas lamps flickered, sputtered, and returned to their normal, weak, yellow-white glow. Within 5 minutes, the town square of Ethelburg was empty. The cobbles were pristine. There was no chasm, no cracks, no sign of the night's horrors. The only sound was the distant metallic tink, tink, tink of a single kerosene can rolling down the street in a breeze that had just begun to stir. In the attic of the Whitlock manor, Eleanor Whitlock slid down the wall, her small body finally succumbing to the shock. She did not faint. She simply shut down, curling into a tight ball, her eyes wide open, staring at the porcelain doll on the floorboards as the first, cold gray light of dawn began to touch the window. Silence woke her. It was not the gentle pre-dawn quiet of a normal morning, filled with the promise of birdsong and the distant clatter of the milkman. This was a dead silence, an absolute pressurized void of sound that pushed against her eardrums. Eleanor uncurled from the floorboards, her entire body aching with a cold stiffness. The attic was gray with the weak light of morning. The air was still, frigid, and carried no scent at all. The coppery tang of the fog was gone, but so was the smell of pipe tobacco, her mother's lavender, the sawdust from the quarry, and the bread from Hemlock's bakery. The world had been scrubbed clean of life. She stood on trembling legs. The hum was gone. The procession was gone. The whole was gone. A dream. It must have been a dream. A terrible, dreadful night terror brought on by the fog and her parents' argument. She stumbled out of the attic, her hand trailing on the wallpaper. "Papa?" The house was cold. The air was heavy. "Mama?" She descended the main staircase. The front door was still wide open, letting in the pale, indifferent morning light. She walked into the dining room. The table was set for 3. Her father's breakfast, a half-eaten piece of toast, a cup of cold coffee, sat exactly as he had left it. A fly was buzzing over the congealed egg yolk. That simple, mundane sound, the buzzing of a single fly, was so jarring in the profound silence that Eleanor gasped. She ran to the kitchen. The stove was cold. The great cast-iron pot of water for the morning's washing was empty. She ran to her parents' bedroom. The bed was made. Her mother's nightgown was not on the pillow. Her father's suit was not in the wardrobe. The smiling preacher, the hole, the shuffling line. It was not a dream. The panic that had been frozen inside her finally broke. It came not as a scream, but as a dry, racking sob that tore at her throat. She ran back to the open front door, screaming now, the sound raw and shrill in the dead quiet street. "Mama! Papa! Come back!" Her voice echoed off the fronts of the houses, a lonely, desperate sound. No doors opened. No windows were thrown wide. No angry neighbor told her to be quiet. The echo faded, and the silence that rushed back in was heavier than before. It was the silence of a tomb, the silence of a stage after all the actors have gone home, leaving only the painted scenery. Eleanor Whitlock, aged 10, stood on the porch of her black marble house, the sole living human being in the pristine, empty town of Ethelberg. For the first hour, she ran. She ran from her house to the street, calling for her parents. Then she ran to the baker's, Mr. Hemlock's. The door was unlocked. She pushed it open, the little bell above it chiming with mocking cheerfulness. Inside, the ovens were cold, but a tray of unbaked loaves sat on the counter, the dough risen high and then collapsed into a pale, yeasty mass. The cash register was open, the day's earnings still sitting in the drawer. She fled the bakery and ran to the schoolhouse. Her desk, the third in the second row, was waiting. Her slate was clean, ready for the day's lessons. Mrs. Davies's spectacles were not on the desk. They had walked into the chasm with her. Eleanor's panic began to curdle into a strange, cold dread. The town was not just empty, it was wrong. She made her way to the stables at the edge of town, where the quarry kept its great draft horses. Surely the animals would be there. She slid open the heavy barn door. The horses were there, all 12 of them, standing in their stalls. But they were not moving. They stood as still as statues, their heads hung low, their eyes wide and white-ringed with terror. They had not touched their oats or hay. A thick foamy lather coated their flanks. They had been terrified, almost to death, and then frozen in place. When Eleanor reached out a trembling hand to touch Big Jim, the largest Percheron, the horse did not react. It just stood, breathing in shallow, shuddering gasps, its great body rigid with a fear that had not subsided with the dawn. She backed away, the unnatural stillness of the animals more terrifying than the empty houses. She walked, she had stopped running now, to the center of town, the square. She approached it with shuffling, hesitant steps. The cobbles were just cobbles. She knelt and touched the spot where the chasm had opened. The stones were cold, damp with morning dew. There was no crack, no seam, no hint of the impossible void that had swallowed 411 souls. It was as if a surgeon had opened the earth, removed its heart, and sewn it back up without leaving a scar. She looked at the gas lamps. The wicks were black, the glass clean. They were simple iron posts. They did not look like pulsing purple eyes. Had she imagined it? Had the fog driven her to madness? No, her parents were gone. She sat on the edge of the dry town fountain, the only child in a town built for hundreds. The sun was rising higher now, casting sharp, clear shadows. But the town felt flat. It felt like a photograph of a town. The houses were facades. The doors opened to empty rooms, not to homes. A terrible adult realization settled upon her. The town of Ethelberg was still here, but it was dead. It was a corpse, pristine and laid out, waiting for a burial that would never come. And the birds. She finally realized what was missing. There were no birds. The sky was a clear, sharp blue, but it was empty. The whispering woods that surrounded the valley were completely, utterly silent. The buzzing fly in her kitchen had been an anomaly, a tiny oversight. Whatever had come, whatever had harvested the town, had taken the life from the life, leaving only the silent, waiting shells. Her feet, acting of their own accord, carried her to the one place she had not yet checked, the place where the horror had been orchestrated. The First Reformation Church. The great oak doors were ajar, just as Reverend Blackwood had left them. Eleanor, small as she was, had to put her entire weight into one of them to shoulder it open wide enough to slip through. The air inside was cold, stale, and smelled powerfully of ozone and dust. The nave was dark, the stained glass windows throwing muted, sickly colors onto the pews. At first she thought her eyes were playing tricks on her. The pews were full. Her heart leaped into her throat, a wild hope that it was all a test, a horrible trick. "Mrs. Davies?" she whispered, seeing a shape that looked just like her teacher. She stepped closer. The pews were not filled with people, they were filled with clothes and dust. In the second row, where Mr. and Mrs. Hemlock always sat, were their Sunday clothes, a simple wool suit and a dark print dress. The clothes were sitting upright, as if worn by invisible congregants, and inside the clothes was a pile of fine gray dust. Eleanor walked the aisle, her footsteps echoing like gunshots in the vast, dead space. Every pew, the same thing, a dress, a suit, a child's sailor outfit, each one sitting in its proper place, filled with a neat, undisturbed pile of gray ash. It was as if the hum had liquefied them, and the chasm had drained them, leaving only their clothes and this residue. All 411. Her parents were not here. They, like the Reverend, had been taken whole. She reached the front of the church. The pulpit where Blackwood had stood was intact. The large leather-bound Bible sat upon it, open. Eleanor was not tall enough to read it, but she could see the page. It was open to the book of Revelation. But the altar, the space behind the pulpit, was gone. Where the marble altar and the communion rail should have been, there was only a hole. It was the same as the one in the square, only smaller. A perfect 5-foot circle of absolute blackness, cut cleanly through the church's floorboards and the stone foundation beneath. It was not a pit, it was a well. Eleanor crept to the edge. The hum was not gone. It was here, faint and sleeping, rising from that impossible depth. It sounded like a distant, contented sigh. And the smell, ozone, yes, but also damp earth, and something indescribably foul, like rotting meat and spoiled milk. This was not a door. This was the throat. She saw something glinting on the floor near the edge of the pit. It was a single, black, horn-rimmed spectacle. Mrs. Davies's. It must have fallen as she... Eleanor recoiled, scrambling backward, her hands slipping on the dusty floorboards. She kicked over a communion tray, the silver cups scattering with a terrible clatter. The hum from the pit seemed to inhale, the sighing sound growing momentarily stronger, as if disturbed from its slumber. Eleanor didn't wait. She turned and fled the church, running full tilt, pushing the heavy door closed behind her, the thud of the oak echoing the final beat of a dead heart. She ran from the church, across the empty square, past the frozen horses, and did not stop until she was back inside her own empty house, the door bolted fast behind her. She spent the next 2 days in the attic. She did not eat. She did not sleep. She sat in the wardrobe, buried in the mothball-scented coats, her knees drawn to her chest, rocking back and forth. The silence of the town was her jailer. At times, she would crawl to the window and look out over Ethelberg. It remained unchanged. A perfect, silent model of a town. The sun rose, the sun set. The gas lamps, their fuel exhausted, did not light. The nights were utterly dark. On the third day, hunger, a simple animal need, drove her downstairs. She went to the pantry. It was fully stocked. Tins of beef, jars of peaches, crackers, smoked sausages. Her parents had been prepared for a long winter. She opened a tin of peaches with a kitchen knife, her hands shaking, and ate the cloyingly sweet fruit with her fingers, the syrup dripping down her chin. The act of eating, so normal, broke the spell of her paralysis. The question that had been hovering in the back of her mind now screamed for an answer. Why me? Why had she been spared? Why was she the only one? She was not special. She was not particularly devout, like the Reverend, nor particularly strong, like her father. She was just Eleanor. She began to search the house, not for food, but for an answer. She tore through her mother's sewing room, her father's study. She looked for a note, a letter, anything. In her father's study, behind a row of geology textbooks, she found his private ledger. It was not for the quarry. It was a personal journal. She sat in his big leather chair, her feet not touching the floor, and opened it. Most entries were mundane. Quarry expenses, notes on new machinery, complaints about the weather. But as she got closer to the present, the entries grew erratic. September 14th, 1892. Blackwood grows bold. He speaks of the founder's debt as if it were a mortgage note. The man is a fanatic. But the quarry's output has never been better. The black marble vein, it seems endless. almost unnatural. September 30th. Catherine attended a special service. She came back pale, clutching that damnable wooden charm Blackwood hands out. She speaks of the tithe and the compact. She believes it. She truly believes our prosperity is a gift from the soil and that a payment is due. October 10th. I confronted Blackwood. I told him his superstitious nonsense was frightening the town. He laughed. He told me the whispering woods do not whisper, they wait. He said the 99-year cycle is ending. He said the hunger beneath must be fed, or it will take its own. He said the founders promised it the entire town in exchange for the quarry's wealth. Eleanor's blood ran cold. A 99-year cycle. This had happened before. She turned to the final entry. It was dated the night of the fog, October 14th. Her father's hand was shaky, the ink splattered. It is true. I saw the signs in the quarry. The stones are humming. The fog. It is not fog. Blackwood is preparing them. They are all walking to their doom, and they think it is salvation. I tried to take Catherine and Eleanor and flee. But the fog is too thick, and she will not go. Catherine is one of them. She has locked the doors. She says the watcher must be in place. Blackwood came to the house. He did not knock. He told me the compact had one caveat. A witness must be left to hold the memory of the tithe, to bear the mark. He said it anchors the town, lest it be consumed entirely, and allows the hunger to sleep another century. He wanted Eleanor. He said she was fey, observant, perfect. She would be the watcher. It would not take her. It does not take its own designated eye. He gave me a choice. All three of us are taken. Or Catherine and I join the harvest, and Eleanor is spared to watch. May God, if there is one, forgive me. I have made my daughter the watcher. I have bought her life with my own and with her innocence. I hear the hum. It is time. I love you, Eleanor. Do not look. Eleanor dropped the journal. It clattered to the floor. She was not an accident. She was not a survivor. She was a sacrifice. A living sacrifice, left behind to be the memory of a town that had paid its debt. A watcher. The word echoed the cold, clinical assessment of the shadow figure that had stood in her attic doorway. It hadn't been looking for her. It had been checking on her, ensuring the witness was in place. Her father's love was a cold comfort. He had chosen to leave her in hell, to save her from the void. Eleanor walked slowly from the study to the grand parlor, a room reserved for important guests. A large gilt-framed mirror hung over the cold marble fireplace. She had avoided her reflection for 3 days. She was afraid of the girl she would see. She stood before the mirror. A small, pale creature stared back, her hair matted, her nightgown stained with peach syrup. She looked like a ghost haunting her own home. Her father's journal had said the watcher must bear the mark. She leaned in close, scanning her own face. There was a smudge of dirt on her cheek, a scratch on her chin, and her eye, her left eye. Eleanor had always had blue eyes. Whitlock blue, her father called them. The girl in the mirror had one blue eye. The other, the left, was no longer blue. The iris, the colored part, had turned a perfect, flat, obsidian black. It was not the black of a pupil, but the black of the quarry stone, a deep, light-eating black that seemed to have no depth. It looked like a drop of ink spilled in a pool of milk. She touched the skin beneath it. It felt no different. She blinked. The black eye blinked back. She closed her right eye, seeing the world only through the marked one. The parlor shifted. The light was duller, but the edges of things were sharper. She could see the fine layer of dust on the mantel. She could see the intricate web of a spider in the corner, and she could see through the floor. Not like glass, but she could perceive a faint, pulsating, black-purple energy beneath the floorboards, the same color as the gas lamps during the procession. It was the hum, visualized. It was the sleeping presence of the hunger beneath. It was everywhere under the town, a vast spider-webbing network of dormant energy. She closed the marked eye. The world snapped back to normal. The energy was gone. The mark wasn't just a brand, it was a sense. She had been tied to the entity that had consumed her world. She was its anchor, its memory, Its eye. The knowledge settled in her not with terror, but with a cold, dreadful clarity. She understood. She was Eleanor Whitlock, the Watcher of Ethelberg, and she was utterly, completely alone. Weeks passed. October gave way to a bitter November. The silence of Ethelberg became Eleanor's companion. She learned to survive. She looted the pantry of her own home, then the general store, bundling herself in layers of her mother's clothes and her father's wool socks. She dragged a mattress to the kitchen, the warmest room in the house, and slept by the cold stove. She read her father's geology books by candlelight, the words blurring, her only company the silent, dust-filled clothes in the church. She never went to the church, but she felt the pit. Through her marked eye, she could sense its slow, sleeping breath, the faint, dormant hum that was her constant companion. The town was changing. Without human hands, it began to decay, but in a way that was too fast. The paint on the houses began to peel in great curling sheets. A strange black-green moss grew thick on the damp cobbles. The whispering woods were encroaching, their branches seeming to crawl over the fences, pulling the outlying houses back into the earth. The town was being digested. One frigid afternoon, while scavenging for tinned beans in the general store, she heard a sound, a cough. It was dry, hacking, and unmistakably human. Eleanor dropped the tin, which clattered loudly on the floorboards. She froze, her heart hammering. "Who's there?" a voice rasped. It was cracked with disuse. From behind a tower of flour sacks, a man emerged. He was skeletal, wrapped in filthy furs, and clutched an old hunting rifle. His beard was matted, his eyes wild and terrified. Eleanor recognized him. It was Jedediah Hemlock, not the baker but his cousin known as Old Man Hemlock. He was the town recluse, a trapper and hermit who lived in a cabin deep in the whispering woods, surfacing only a few times a year to trade pelts for salt and ammunition. He had not been in town for the harvest. It's the Whitlock girl," he croaked, lowering the rifle slightly. "Saints preserve us. I thought it took everyone." "It did," Eleanor said. Her voice, from weeks of disuse, was a dry whisper. Hemlock's eyes darted around the empty store. I saw the light. From my cabin. A green-yellow light like the devil's own aurora. And the sound. That awful grinding sound. I barricaded my door. I waited. For weeks. I only just ran out of jerky." He stared at her, his terror giving way to confusion. "Why are you here, child? Why ain't you gone? Where is everyone?" "They were taken," Eleanor said, her voice flat, devoid of emotion. "Reverend Blackwood, the compact, the harvest." The old trapper's face went pale beneath the grime. He knew the old stories. Unlike her father, he had believed them. The 99-year cycle, Hemlock whispered, making a sign of the cross, a gesture he must have learned in a childhood long past. "It came. And you're still here. I am the Watcher," Eleanor said, the words tasting strange on her tongue. Hemlock looked at her and his gaze fixed on her left eye. He didn't ask. He just nodded, a terrible, slow understanding dawning on his face. The mark. They left an eye to see the debt was paid. You poor, cursed creature. For the first time since that night, Eleanor wept. Not for her parents, but for herself. She wept because someone else was alive, and he had looked at her and seen not a girl, but a curse. Hemlock did not stay in the town. He called it poisoned ground. A graveyard that don't know it's full. He grabbed what supplies he could. Tins of coffee, salt, cartridges, and told Eleanor she was coming with him. "You can't stay here, girl," he said, his voice rough. "This place, it's sleeping, but it ain't dead. It's digesting, and when it wakes up, it'll notice the morsel it left on the plate." He led her out of the decaying town, past the frozen, terrified horses, who were still alive, a living monument to that night, and into the whispering woods. The woods were silent. Hemlock, a man who had lived his whole life by the sounds of the forest, was visibly unnerved. No squirrels, no deer, no birds. It hit the life clean out of this valley. His cabin was a tiny one-room hovel dug into the side of a hill, miles from Ethelberg. It was cramped, dirty, and smelled of wood smoke and dried pelts. To Eleanor, it was the safest place in the world. That night, over a fire of scavenged, dry wood, Hemlock talked. The natives, the ones who were here before the founders, they didn't call it Ethelberg. They called it the place where the earth eats. He explained that the entity, which he called the hunger beneath the roots, was ancient. It was not a spirit, not a demon. It was just hungry. It was part of the land itself. The founders, they were desperate men, Hemlock said, poking the fire, fleeing debts in Boston. They found the black marble, but they couldn't quarry it. The ground was unstable. They say the first foreman just sank into the earth, lost. So they made a deal, Eleanor whispered, finishing the thought from her father's journal. Aye, Hemlock nodded. They found the old stones, the native stones, what marked the maw, and that preacher of theirs, the first Blackwood, he spoke to it, offered it a pact, prosperity, the best quarry stone in the world, in exchange for a tithe, a single soul, every year. But my father's journal said 99 years. The first Blackwood was clever. Hemlock spat. He tricked it. He offered it one soul at the end of 99 years, instead of one every year. But he didn't specify the size of the soul. He offered it the collective soul of the town, all at once, a feast to buy another century of peace. So, Eleanor's mind worked, cold and logical. Ethelberg was built to be a sacrifice. It was a farm. We were the crops, waiting to be harvested. Hemlock looked at her, his expression grim. Aye, and the harvest is done. And now, it knows we're here, the leftovers. As if summoned by his words, a sound drifted through the trees. It was the hum, faint, distant, but unmistakable. It was coming from the valley, and it was getting stronger. It's awake, Hemlock whispered, grabbing his rifle. He kicked dirt onto the fire, plunging the cabin into darkness. It knows we're out here. It knows the watcher ain't watching. They peered out the single, small window of the cabin. Down in the valley, where Ethelberg lay, a light had appeared. The same sick yellow-green fog had returned, filling the bowl of the valley, and it was pulsing with a slow, rhythmic light. The hum was the pulse. It's calling you, Hemlock said, his voice tight with fear. He was looking at Eleanor. It wants its eye back in place. Eleanor felt it, the same magnetic, drowsy pull from that first night. The urge to stand, to walk, to return to her attic room and watch. Her left eye, the black one, was aching, throbbing in time with the light. I can't, she stammered, gripping the doorframe. You have to fight it, girl. It marked you, but it don't own you. Not yet. But the town was no longer passive. The hum changed, and with it, the fog. It began to creep up the hillside, flowing between the trees like a tide. And within the fog, shadows moved. They were not the tall, angular shadow things from the first night. These were the shadows of the townsfolk. Eleanor watched, her marked eye giving her the terrible clarity to see them. It was Mrs. Davies, wandering, her hands outstretched, searching for her lost spectacles. It was Mr. Hemlock the baker, kneading invisible dough. It was children playing a silent game of tag. They were echoes, memories trapped in the fog, reenacting their final mundane moments before the summons. They're phantoms, Hemlock breathed. Just pictures. No, Eleanor whispered, her black eye seeing the truth. They're lures. As she spoke, the shadow of her mother, Catherine Whitlock, detached from the fog at the edge of the woods. It stood, clad in its nightgown, and turned its head toward the cabin. It raised a hand and beckoned. Eleanor, come home. It's cold. The voice was a dry, sibilant whisper, like leaves blowing over stone. Eleanor's resolve shattered. Mama? She took a step toward the door. Hemlock grabbed her, his fingers biting into her arm. That ain't your mother, child. It's the bait. The hum grew to a demanding roar. The shadow figures of the town stopped their pantomime. All at once they turned their heads toward the cabin. Their faces were blank, misty voids, but their intent was clear. We have to run, Hemlock said, grabbing his pack. Not west, back to Albany. It'll expect that. We have to go north over the ridge. It's rough country, but it's the only way it won't be looking. He kicked open the back door of the hovel and shoved Eleanor out into the frigid night. "Run, child, and don't look back, no matter what you hear." They ran. They scrambled up the steep ridge behind the cabin. Hemlock, despite his age, moving with a trapper's agility, pulling Eleanor along. The forest was dark, but the pulsing green-black light from the valley below illuminated the trees in a horrifying silhouette. The hum was everywhere. It was in the ground, in the trees, in her teeth. The shadows of Ethelberg were streaming up the hill behind them. They didn't run, they flowed, like spilt ink, gaining speed. "Don't look at 'em," Hemlock yelled. "Look at my back. Just keep moving." At the crest of the ridge, they paused for a breath. Below them, the entire valley of Ethelberg was revealed. The fog was a swirling vortex, centered on the town square. But the town itself was gone. The houses, the church, the streets, they were sinking. The black-green moss had covered everything, and the ground itself was undulating, like the skin of a great beast. The structures were being pulled down into the earth, foundations and all. The entity was not just digesting the souls, it was consuming the memory of the town, pulling the physical shells under the soil. The only thing left standing was the black marble manor on the hill. Her home. It stood pristine, untouched, a beacon. And in the third-floor attic window, Eleanor saw a light, a single candle, waiting for the watcher to return. "It's saving your perch," Hemlock panted, his voice a ragged gasp. "It needs you." "Eleanor." The whisper was not from the fog. It was in her head. It was her mother's voice, full of pain and longing. Eleanor stumbled, the sound crippling her. She clutched her head. The shadows reached the ridge. The echo of Reverend Blackwood was at their lead. He was no longer smiling. His face was a vortex of rage. He raised a spectral, gnarled staff. Thwack! A root, thick as a man's arm and covered in the black-green moss, burst from the ground at their feet, coiling like a snake. Hemlock shoved Eleanor forward. "Go! Get to the road. It's 3 miles north. Find Providence. Go!" He turned, raising his rifle, and fired into the face of the approaching Blackwood shadow. The bullets passed through the mist with no effect. "It ain't wanting me," Hemlock yelled. "It wants the Watcher. Now run!" Eleanor scrambled, half falling, down the other side of the ridge. She looked back one last time. Old Man Hemlock was not fighting the shadows. He was fighting the earth. The ground around him was alive with writhing, root-like tendrils bursting from the soil. They wrapped around his legs, his arms. He didn't scream. He just set his jaw, brought his rifle butt down on a grasping root, and met the eyes of the spectral preacher. "You ain't getting this soul, you black-hearted devil!" he roared. A massive mossy tendril erupted from the ground beneath him, silencing his curse. It pulled him down, his rifle discharging one last time into the uncaring night sky. He was gone, pulled into the damp, hungry earth. Eleanor didn't scream. She couldn't. She just ran, her small legs pumping, the hum seeming to laugh in her ears. The vision of Hemlock's end burned into her mind. She ran for what felt like hours. The hum followed her, a relentless predator. The trees of the whispering woods, now fully awake and hostile, seemed to shift. Branches, bare and black, lowered to block her path, to snag her clothes. Roots buckled the earth beneath her feet, trying to trip her. The forest was no longer a place of trees and animals. It was an extension of the hunger, and it was trying to herd her, to turn her back toward the valley. But her marked eye, her curse, was now her only guide. Through her right eye she saw only darkness, terror, and grasping branches. Through her left, her black eye, she saw the currents. She saw the lines of energy flowing from the valley, the tendrils of the entity's will. She could see the safe paths, the small gaps where the hum was weaker, the places where the earth was just earth. She followed these gaps, weaving a desperate, instinctive path, closing her normal eye and trusting only the sight the hunger had given her. She was using its own sense against it. The hum grew furious. It was no longer a summons. It was a roar of thwarted rage. The ground began to shake, the entity now trying to flush her out with brute force. Trees began to topple, crashing down around her. She dove into a hollow log, her breath sobbing in her chest. as a giant pine tree crashed down precisely where she had been. She was cornered. The log was surrounded. She could feel the tendrils approaching, sliding through the mud, a network of living roots closing in. This was it. She had failed her father. She had failed Hemlock. She closed her eyes, waiting for the ground to open. And then a new sound, distant but clear. A rooster, a real one, crowing at the false dawn. And the sound of iron on gravel. A wagon. The hum recoiled. The energy, the grasping roots. They hesitated. The entity was ancient, powerful, but its influence was tied to the valley. It was a creature of its own, feeding ground, and she was at its very edge. The tendrils paused, sensing the unhallowed ground of the normal world beyond. This was her chance. Eleanor burst from the log and ran, not toward the sound, but parallel to it, staying just inside the wood line. She ran, her lungs burning, until she saw it. A dirt road, a simple, muddy wagon track. She stood at the edge of the whispering woods. Behind her was the dark, the hum, the pulsing green light, and the all-consuming hunger. In front of her was a road. She took one step, her boot leaving the damp earth of the forest and hitting the packed gravel of the road. The hum stopped. It was cut, just as it had been on the first night. The connection was severed. The trees behind her ceased their groaning. The ground fell still. She stood on the road, safe. The woods behind her now just woods. Silent, dark, and still. She turned and looked back into the darkness. She raised a small, trembling fist. "I am the Watcher," she whispered to the silent trees. "And I remember." She turned her back on Ethelberg and began to walk, a small, solitary figure on a long, dark road. At 6 a.m., a milkman from the town of Providence, 16 miles north of the Ethelberg Valley, found her. He saw a small child, dressed in a tattered, oversized men's coat, walking numbly in the center of the road. He pulled his wagon to a halt, his horse snorting in the cold air. "Child? Child, are you lost? Where are your folk?" Eleanor stopped. She looked up at him. The man gasped when he saw her face. Her hair, which had been a mousy brown, was now stark, snow white. Her face was pale and streaked with filth, and her eyes. One was a terrified human blue. The other was a cold, flat, pit black. She did not answer him. She had not spoken since Jedediah Hemlock's name had been silenced by the earth. She was mute. She was taken to Providence and became a ward of the state. The constable, a practical man named Harris, was baffled. He knew of Ethelberg, a prosperous but reclusive quarry town to the south. He assembled a posse, assuming a disaster, a fire or a plague. Constable Harris and his men rode for 2 days. They found the valley, but they did not find Ethelberg. Where a town of 400 people, a church and a quarry should have been, there was only a meadow. An old, undisturbed meadow, covered in strange black-green moss, as if nothing had ever been built there at all. The whispering woods had already reclaimed the edges. There were no foundations, no scorched earth, no tombstones, no black marble manor on the hill. The only thing they found was a single collapsed cabin on the far ridge, and a rusted, discharged hunting rifle lying near a patch of strangely disturbed earth. The town of Ethelberg, its industry, and its 412 residents had vanished. They were erased from the map and from the world. Eleanor Whitlock was declared the sole survivor of a mass delusion, or an unknown tragedy, and she was eventually placed in the Utica State Asylum. She lived there for 64 years. She never spoke another word. She spent her days in a chair by the window, staring south, towards a valley that no one else believed had ever held a town. The nurses said she was harmless, but that they were unsettled by her. They said that sometimes, especially on foggy October nights, they would hear a low, rhythmic sound in her room, a humming, and they said that until the day she died, she never, ever closed her left eye. She just sat, and she watched.